Today, it's a mix of different projects, building a TP hut, making trees from hydrangea, and making some concrete fencing. Hi everyone, I'm Martin and welcome back to Donnington Castle Model Railway. Now I'm right in the middle of installing point motors on the main layout and also point rodding on the heritage line. So whilst I get on with those jobs, I thought it might be interesting to catch you up on a few other things I've been working on. So today we're going to look at making a track paralleling hut for the southern line. I'll show you how I made a tree using hydrangea. And I'll look at all the different types of fencing that I make on the laser cutter as a great project. If you're just getting into the area or the field and want a kind of an easy win project to start with, then fencing is certainly something to have a go at. And I can show you how I make fencing on the layout here, all different kinds of it, including some new concrete fencing that's going to go alongside the southern line. So I hope you'll enjoy that. Right, let's get stuck into it. And I'm going to start with a track paralleling hut. On a previous video, I mentioned an awkward triangle between the southern lines and the western lines. And I've been thinking about what I might put in that space. But you can see what I'm talking about if I pop up a plan of the layout for you to see. Now, this is quite an interesting place because it's supposed to be away from the station and away from the kind of main areas of habitation. And when you look at the Southern Railway, you see that places between stations, often the site of what are known as track paralleling huts. And it just so happened that I found a project in a book about how to make one. And so I thought it'd be an interesting thing to have a go at. If you're not aware of track paralleling huts, I'll put a diagram up of the Southern Railway. So if you're not familiar with the concept of track paralleling or sectionalizing huts, then I will try and explain. And I will say right up front that I am not an expert in this. I've been learning a bit about this myself. So if I do make any mistakes in this, please do correct me. But from how I understand it, we have substations or main substations and then sectionalizing huts. Now this diagram from the 1930s shows this really nicely. This shows what were newly electrified at the time lines between Hampton Court Junction and Portsmouth. And on it you will see lots of substations marked SS on here, primarily at habited locations near stations. So for example, one in the middle, quite close to the top, we have Farncombe. And then along from that, if we go along to the left, we have one in Guildford. And then between those, we have what are known as track paralleling or sectionalizing huts. In this case, the one between Guildford and Farncombe is at Shalford. Now, the purpose of these huts is to allow what is known double-end feed to the conductor rail. So there is effectively a break or a section of third rail from the substation heading out in both directions. And then that third rail is also broken at the sectionalizing hut. That means that the power can be fed in from the substation and also from the sectionalizing hut, meaning that it is fed from both ends and therefore the voltage should remain fairly constant through that section. And this triangle of land I have is, you could almost imagine it as as a location away from habitation. Therefore, it would be a good place to represent one of these paralleling or sectionalizing huts, meaning that we could then have a substation closer into the station, probably the far side of the station. And that would then, I think, very much set off that line as being a third rail powered bit of railway. So I thought I'd have a little bit of fun and see if I could find any of those huts that are mentioned on that diagram in the present day. So I just randomly picked a location. So this is Liphook, and then we can see the station. This is Google Maps on the terrain view, and then just scan along the track. And if you just keep scrolling down, you'll find things next to the railway, small huts. This is a really good example because we have a road and, more importantly, a bridge nearby, so we can drop our person in.
If we look down, we find what I believe is a substation, so a little bit more substantial than a TP hut.
Now, if you look along the railway, you'll find all different kinds of huts, all different shapes and sizes, some original, some modern, and all sorts of things. So I would certainly recommend just having a bit of a wander down a line and see what you can see. Now, this is a very good example, because if we zoom in, we can now start to see a little bit more. We can see a very concrete looking structure without much on the outside. We can see a phone by the door, what looks like a boarded up or at least a grilled window. There's a doorway in there. And what's most interesting, because it's really hard to see from a lot of the photos of these, is all of the cables. So you will notice that there's lots of wires coming out. So I'm assuming they're coming from the hut, and there were some channels been dug. This looks like an old halt or platform or something here. So this is quite unusual from what I've seen. And then we can see all of these cables coming underneath the track, and we'll notice that they connect into the third rail, but they also connect into the running rails, because obviously in a third rail system, the return current passes back down the lines. And you will also notice here that the third rail is broken at this location, and that we have a feed into both sides of it. And that is effectively then two power sections that this hut is feeding into effectively the opposite end of each of them. So that's really useful. It also shows that if you scan up and down the line, you'll see, as I say, you'll see all shapes and sizes of these. And you'll also see that there is no, from my perspective, it's very difficult to get this thing wrong in terms of what it looks like, because everything will be kind of suited to its own environment. So famous last words, maybe. But I can refer back to this picture a bit later in the process when it comes to running some wires from the hut to the track. So let's have a look at the hut I'm going to build. I did a little bit of research and found that some of the designs of the huts varied based on which bit of electrification work was happening and what kind of electrical gear was available at the time, as to whether it went inside or outside the hut. I've also been reading Modelling the Southern Region book by Chris Ford, and in here, towards the back, there's actually a very interesting little piece on making track paralleling huts. So I decided that I would effectively make what Chris has set out in here. Now, there's lots of detail in here, so it's very easy to take this book, transfer all the measurements over onto Lightburn, which you'll see on the screen now, and then whiz those out on the laser cutter. And what you end up with is a series of pieces. So I've got a nice big base to put this on, then our sides, some window frames, and then some vents and things like that, which I'll do a little bit of work on, and a roof to go on the top. So I will follow the instructions in that book, and next step is going to be to get these pieces painted, at least as a first coat, and I'll come back and show you when that's done. What I did was follow Chris's instructions in the book, but substituting, every time he mentioned plasticard, I've substituted it for wood. So this is 2mm basswood, as is most of this. And I've painted everything up. So the hut itself is rail match concrete, and then I've just streaked some black wash down it just to give it a bit of a weathered effect. We have a windowsill, window. These vents are made out of wood, and then I've just taken a file to them just to file the top off. I don't know if you can see that on camera, to make them look more like vents. So that's all of that stuff. The roof was an interesting one, actually. Something I've never done before. Chris suggested using some tissue paper to give some patterning to the roof. So he mentioned using solvent, because he was obviously working in plastic. In wood, I found that if you go up the top of the roof with Pritt stick and then get a single ply of a tissue and just lay that over the top. And actually, I wish I'd done it slightly less carefully, because where you, and again, this is quite fine detail, you get these lovely effects where the tissue scrumples up slightly. And then I've just gone over the top of that with some acrylic paint, some dark grey, and then over the top with some dry brushing, both light grey and a bit of black as well. So really easy build so far. Next thing's going to be to glue it all together, and that's going to be fairly obvious, I think, from the pieces that are here. And then it'll be a case of doing a little bit of weathering. The only piece that's missing from here is some glazing for the back of here, and the thing that Chris suggested is just to rough up a little bit of clear plastic to give the impression of that mesh glass, which is most likely to be that mesh reinforced glass, which is most likely to be in here. So I'll get the rocket card glue and get all of that assembled, and we'll see what it looks like. And this is our hut assembled. Over the top of the paintwork, I've just gone over with some weathering powders just to add bits of dirt, particularly underneath the vents and places like that. Now this is going to go with this side closest to the track, I believe. And then out the front, my understanding is that there are then going to be, because it's a double track, there are going to be 4 cable troughs and cables coming out for each of the 4 conductor rails, the kind of 2 either side, because our conductor rail splits at this hut. Well, that's as far as I'm aware. If you do know more about these huts and how they operated, and in particular, I'm really interested to know in whether a hut of this style would have any switchgear or electrical some pieces outside of it, or whether it would all be in the hut. I'm hoping it'll all be inside, although if some is outside, that will make it a little bit more interesting to model. So if you do know anything about that, please do let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I need to get the base installed on the layout, and then we can get this on the layout and see how it looks.
First job is just to cut away what is my own sculptor mold around the side of the track, just so that the concrete base can fit into that. Next, we need to think about building up some support underneath that platform. So that involves a little bit more hacking away. As you can see, the concrete base will sit like this. That means it needs a few more supports adding in. And reading the offcuts apart from the laser cutter, you can see some foundations built into that. I'm going to embed this in a bit later on. I'll probably do some concrete walls to make that look like a solid concrete block, and then sculpt the landscape in around it. And here's what the base looks like after being fixed in place, and the hut just placed on top. So I think that's going to work really well. I'm going to get the details correct first before I do any embedding of this into the landscape. But if you have any thoughts on how to make this look more authentic, please do leave them in the comments below. I'm thinking about some signage. So, for example, I found some signs, some TP hut signs for sale on eBay. And I'm guessing that every hut had one of these. So I should probably make one of these as part of that final decoration stage.
Our next topic today is trees made from hydrangeas. And you may have seen the tree in question on the video when I made the river scene, and I'll pop the link up there for you. Now, I'd never thought about hydrangeas as a material to make trees from, but back last year, someone came into the club with a big bag full of hydrangea heads and asked if anyone would like to use them for making trees. Which was new to me. So I thought I'd have a go and see how things turned out. And I'll show you step by step how I made the tree.
And if you're unsure of what a hydrangea is, the most common cultivar we see, certainly here in the UK, looks a little bit like this. These plants are actually pretty ancient, like millions and millions of years old. Not my cup of tea, but there are certainly lots of them in gardens in the UK and around the world. So keep your eyes open and you might spot some material to make some trees from. This is the dried out head of a hydrangea. All the moisture's been taken out of it, and it's also been zapped in the microwave. Now, what you can probably see on here are what look like dried petals. Technically, they are called bracts, and they surround the petals on the flower. So the first job is to remove all of them,
and get down to effectively the more woody structure of the hydrangea head. So I will do that first. So when you've removed all of them, you end up with something a little bit like this. Now, the good things about this for me are that the trunk seems reasonably well proportioned compared to the branches, which is good. And we have this nice branching structure. The one thing I would say about this is that hydrangea flowers tend to be quite uniform. So certainly on this layout, I'm not going to make lots of trees out of them. And when I do, I'm going to be very conscious to try and break up that even structure a little bit. Next job is to paint the trunk and as many of the branches as you can. So I put them in a little bit of foam to hold them here. As I've mentioned before, when making trees, there are a whole range of colours of both trunks and branches, from grey right through to red. So pick whichever is your favourite colour. I'm going for a very dark brown here. And when that paint's dry, we'll come back with some polyfibre. The next step is to get some polyfibre and to stretch it out really, really thin. So you need a tiny amount and really kind of extend that out. This is Woodland Scenics polyfibre. It's left over from a bag I've had for a long time. Someone on the channel mentioned previously that if you hunt around, you can find much cheaper polyfibre. They mentioned some places in either Australia or New Zealand. I can't remember exactly which one. If you're in the UK, then if you take a trip to Hobbycraft, you will find cushion or pillow stuffing in big bags. It's white, so you will need to stain it or paint it in some way for this kind of work, but it is considerably cheaper than buying it from a Scenics provider. Next, we coat the main branches in glue. I've used PVA here, and then stretch the polyfibre over the branches till you've got a very nice, I guess, tree shape. Leave that to dry, and then we'll come back and apply some scatters. Once that's all dry, I now use extra hold hairspray. So I blast all over the polyfibre with that, trying not to get that too far down the trunk. And then in this case, I've used a dark green fine turf. So I've just sprinkled that all over to get a nice thick coating on there. And then in this instance, I've then picked out some of the raised areas and given them a sprinkling of a slightly lighter green, just to give that variation in colour. Let that all dry, and I will then usually blast that over with a can of matte varnish, and that should then seal everything into place. But I would say just have a play around, use different scatters, coarse and fine, and those will give you different effects. And I don't think you can really go wrong with that. Just kind of experiment and have fun with your modelling doing it. Next step, this tree's ready to go into the layout. And the last topic today is fences. And I thought I would talk about this because I am in the process of making some concrete Southern Railway style fencing for the layout. That also made me realize that a lot of the fencing on the layout I have made myself. And in fact, they were the very earliest projects I did when I first got into laser cutting. And I thought that if you're interested in getting into that field and are looking for a good starter project, then making some fencing is a great place to start. So what I'll do is I'll show you various types of fencing that I've made on the layout, how they're made in Lightburn, and then show you what they look like on the layout. Part of that will be some new concrete fencing to go alongside the southern main lines. So let's get into Lightburn and I'll show you just how easy it is to create your own fencing. Here are 5 different types of fence post that I've created, and I'll show you exactly what these look like in a minute. What I thought I'll do is I would start out with a very simple demonstration of how you can create a fence post. So we're here in Lightburn. Obviously, you can use whichever drawing tool you're most comfortable in, as long as you can export in a format that you can import into your cutting software, then that will be fine. So here I have a grid of 1mm squares, which makes it nice and easy. Fence posts I like to make out of 2mm basswood. And what I'll do is I will show you how to replicate or create these fence posts here. I will pop up on screen a photo of the prototype here. And thanks to Michael for these photos. These are actually original line-side fences from the Lambourn Valley Railway, as you will see at the embankment that they are situated on part of that disused line. Who built them, I'm not too sure. Whether that was a GWR thing or whether that was a later BR thing, I don't know. But they are the kind that you find alongside, or you used to find alongside that railway. And it's a really easy fence post to make with our drawing tool. I'm just going to do it alongside one of these so you can see. So obviously figure out how tall you want your fence post to be. We're working in 4mm scale here. And then we can just click to create this shape. It will, if you have snap to grid set on, it will be nice and easy because it will just follow this shape. And then you can create yourself a little spike to be able to fit that into there. And let's just zoom in so you can have a look. Let's just change the color again so you can see that better. So there we go. If you want to make any slight adjustments, you can use this tool to show. So if we want to make that just 1mm in size, we can just move that all around. If you wanted to make the top of the post a bit bigger, a bit of a sharper angle, you can do that. So nice and easy. In this case, what I did was add some etch lines onto them, meaning that then when you run a wire or a bit of string along them, it can sit in these grooves. And this is the kind of fence post we used on the Lambourn layout. So I will pop an image of a fence that's using that up on screen for you to have a look and see how that turns out. Moving on, we have a 3-rail fence. This is done in 2 parts. First, we have the fence posts made using exactly the same technique that we've just seen for the other posts. This time we have our rails. Our rails are made in 1mm balsa wood. So in this case, we've added square holes into our posts that are 1mm by 1mm. And obviously these rotate round through 90 degrees, so this rail slots into that hole, and you can then create a whole run of that fencing really, really easily. And I'll show you where I've used that on the layout now. And then another type of fencing that I used on Lambourn, where we have these square top posts with this notch cut out, and then we have a square rail that sits in the top of that. Originally, there would have been wire through these and pulled taut through them, but when we use these, I didn't do that. I just used this top rail, and I'll show you a photograph of that from Lambourn. And now moving on, we have these standard wire rail posts. So again, post is made in exactly the same way that I've just shown you. This time we're just using a circle, so we can just use a circle tool to make that, and then set that to the size that we want. In this case, these holes are, this is grouped. So these are about 0.75 millimeters, and that's fine for most craft wire, or if you're going to use some stiffened thread or something like that. And that's nice and easy. And I will show you, I've used quite a lot on the layout. So let me show you where I've used some of those and how they look. And then finally, we have some cattle dock posts. So again, same basic principle, just decide how many holes you want. The photos of the cattle docks that I've been replicating have 5 rails. So 5 holes in that. A little bit fiddly to do. But again, I'll show you a photo from Lambourne of where they've been used. Okay, so as you can see, it's really easy with some very basic drawing skills to create fence posts. So it's a really good first project. But what I'd like to do now on the layout is to create some Southern Region style fencing. So let's go and do a bit of research and start that process. So I did a little bit of research online. There are obviously 00 scale kits available for Southern fencing. This one, I think, is the ratio one. You can see what that looks like made up. But I couldn't see a huge amount of detail on that. I had a look in some books, but again, people were tending to be taking photos of trains rather than fences. So I thought I would have a look and see if I can find some fencing that still exists today. One place that I knew that's very concrete is Tolworth. So I had a look on Google Street View, and if you drop your little person in there and then rotate round, let's move a little bit closer. You're a little bit far away still, but right up here we can see some fencing. So we can distinctively see these rectangular panels. Doesn't appear to be any patterning in there, although there does appear to be that rough concrete effect on them. Square posts with this pyramid-shaped top, and what looks like it's like an edging around it. So just be mindful of that in our design. My other research turned up the fact that I believe that the Southern Railway made these in both 6 foot and 4'6" heights. For line side fencing, I'm going to go for the 6 foot variety. I believe they were made down in Devon somewhere at a concrete factory down there, but I may be wrong on that. If you know any better, please do leave a comment. Okay, so next step for me was then to go back to some of the kits and to look at what sizing it says those are on the packets. Check that against these proportions and the idea that these are 6 foot tall, and then transfer all that into Lightburn. So the first decision was what thickness of wood I was going to make these out of. I initially started out by thinking I was going to do it in 2 mil. So I started out by making these posts, which are these are 29, so 30 mil high. But you've got to remember you've got the little base to insert into the landscape there as well. I made a few of these and they just didn't feel chunky enough. So I then decided to move over and make some slightly thicker. These are 3 mil across, as you can see by the 3 squares, but I made these on 3.6 mil plywood, which is what I had to hand. They look roughly square when you make those, so that was fine. These made using exactly the same technique as that very simple fencing I showed you at the start. And then the panels themselves, very easy to make, just literally a rectangle. Drag out your rectangle and then change the size to what you need. So really, really simple thing to do. I decided to try and replicate that kind of panel edging using an engraved line on here. In hindsight, I think that probably needs to come down slightly. So I will alter that for future batches. But yeah, that's these panels. These are green, so these are 2mm. So the idea was to create 2mm panels and 3.6 or roughly 3mm posts, and then you had that little bit of overlap of the post, which gave that same effect that we saw on that fencing at Tolworth. So I will show you what this looks like when it comes out the laser cutter and has had a coat of concrete paint over the top. These are the posts when they come out. Now, the one thing that you can see that they have a triangular shape at the top. Laser cutting is not really good for getting you things like pyramid shapes. So what I do is just take a nail file to those and just kind of file back the top to turn them into a pyramid. And then this is what they turn out like. So this is a post stuck onto a fence section. These have been painted using rail match concrete. They haven't been weathered yet. The idea is to create all of these panels, and then that means when I know exactly what I'm going to be doing with them, I can then stick these sections together and create longer runs of fencing. Well, I'm not upside down. I can create longer runs of fencing. So, and you can also then see that we've got that a little bit of definition between the post and the concrete section because of the differences size of woods that we use to make them. So I think that looks quite good. And with a bit of weathering, I think they'll look great alongside the track. But a really, really easy project. That if you do find yourself with a new laser cutter and want to know where to get started, I really recommend having a go at making yourself different types of fencing to add some interest to your layout. And those are some of the smaller jobs that I've been working on alongside the big projects of track laying and station building and things like that. So I hope you've enjoyed seeing them. I'm really keen to get your thoughts, particularly on the track paralleling hut and anything I can do to make that look more authentic. I know some of the viewers of the channel either work on or have previously worked on the Southern Railway. So if you have any insights from your time working on the railway, then please do let me know. And obviously, if anyone has any comments on what I've been doing, any thoughts or improvements in the way that I could do things, then please do drop a comment and let me know. But thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed seeing these projects, and I look forward to seeing you on another video soon. Bye-bye.